Wave to Tonya. Hello. There you go.
Hello, good morning, everybody. You
Right.
guys are all so far apart from each other. COVID is over.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to introduce, when Piers stops playing, my friend Tonya Riegel, or Tatiana Riegel. What do people call you these days?
A bit of both.
Bit of
My
both.
real name is Tatiana, but I go by Tonya if it ends up being too much. Yeah.
But your credits are Tatiana.
Yes.
Okay. So Tanya's talked to us from London, where she's editing, are we allowed to say?
Sure.
Supergirl for
Warner
DC?
Brothers.
Warner
DC
Brothers.
Warner Brothers, yeah.
Warner Brothers.
Yep.
Okay, so Tanya, can you just first of all talk a little bit about how you got started in the business? So Tanya's a
Yes.
Oscar-nominated Hollywood film editor, by the way, which we'll come to, I'm sure.
That used to work with Katie a long time ago. We used to work together. And she's been sorely missed ever since. Before I introduce myself, tell me a little bit about this class and people's interests and stuff so I can move in that way if possible.
This class is called Graduate Practical Project. So these are final year students. Some of them are writing scripts only, but most of them are making films. So there's a couple of three documentaries, I think. Mainly fiction, some animation as well. So they've mainly shot. Have you all shot now? Who hasn't shot yet? Please tell me. Oh, okay. A little bit more to shoot. Okay, they've mainly shot and they're starting their editing now.
Okay. So most of you are wanting to be directors, a few writers, and obviously you know everything else about the process because you have to go through it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
More or less?
Some of them want to be editors, I think.
Okay.
But, yeah, just like an overview of how you got started, and then we'll talk a bit about the business. And
Sure.
Cool.
Well, I got started a long time ago, back when everything was done on film, which was really a lot of fun, but slow. And I grew up loving movies. I love movies. I would go and watch them all the time and watch them over and over again, and I just loved it. And I knew I wanted to be involved in some way, but I had no idea how. My father was a university professor and an astronomer and a physicist, and my mother was a elementary school teacher. So no contact with the business at all, although I lived in Los Angeles. And the good thing then, as opposed to now, is that they used to shoot a lot of stuff on location all around Los Angeles. So I would see stuff all the time. I also live not that far from 20th Century Fox Studios, or Fox Studios now as they call it. And when I was a kid, I used to go and sneak onto the lot and watch them shooting shows and stuff before they had any sort of security. But anyway, I knew I wanted to be involved. I had no idea how. I didn't know what any of the positions were other than sort of what I saw in credits on the screen and what I thought those jobs were. So in my mind, I kind of went through, I didn't go to film school. I ended up going to university I was a political science major because both of my parents were teachers and they wanted me to have a well-rounded education, probably thinking that I would never amount to anything in the movie business. So they were trying to be cautious. And I listened. But then when I graduated, I moved back to Los Angeles. I went to school in Boston. I moved back to Los Angeles and tried to figure out what all of these positions could possibly be and if I had any interest in them. And I sort of went through my list and kind of crossed them all off. I had seen a lot of stuff being shot around Los Angeles, and it seemed to me, from my naive eye, that unless you were the director or the director of photography, you spent a lot of time sitting around and not doing much, and that didn't appeal to me. I don't have the eye of a director of photography, nor of a production designer or anything like that. I definitely knew I didn't want to act. I certainly knew I didn't have the ability to write. I didn't have the confidence of being a director. I definitely didn't want to be a studio executive. And the thing that was left basically was editing. And that was my very scientific way of ending up as an editor. But it ended up being a real perfect balance for me and my personality of what is very much a creative job and a technical job. And obviously over the course of time, as we've moved from film into digital and into these big, huge visual effects movies, the technology is constantly changing, and it keeps my job interesting, and I'm constantly learning, which is fun. It never becomes routine. Parts of it do, but as a whole, it doesn't become routine. And it's made for a very lovely career. The other great thing about my job versus, for example, a director of photography or a director is I get to work inside. I don't have to deal with weather. I don't have to deal with staying up all night for night shoots. And there's a certain practicality of it. Also, my jobs last a lot longer. I've been on this for 15 months now. So as you work freelance, you learn that most of your career is spent looking for work. So you want to minimize that as much as possible. And editing just kind of checked all of the boxes. I like it. I like working with a crew. I like very much working with the director. You work with them side by side for weeks, months, over a year sometimes. And it becomes hopefully becomes a real true collaboration where you get to have a tremendous contribution, where you both have a love and a desire to have the film be everything that the director wants it to be and everything it can be. So I first got started by saying, okay, I want to get into post-production. And I didn't know anything. And my grandfather taught journalism and film, and he introduced me to a director that he knew, who immediately pawned me off to his editor, who immediately pawned me off to his assistant editor. That didn't really go anywhere. And then my stepfather's buddy's girlfriend or something was an assistant, a personal assistant to a director. And she's like, oh, I'll introduce you to the editor that we just used. And he was lovely. He had lunch with me, gave me a bunch of names. And from those first names, I began to spread my list into more and more and more and more people. Again, this is before email and, all of that. So it was snail mail and typing up letters, and sorry, I'm dating myself a lot, but it's true. It was a slow process, and you have to sit around and wait for phone calls. And if you get that call, you have to quickly remember who they are and how you got their name and blah, blah, blah. So I had this big chart that I made. And my first job, which was working for free, was 9 generations down of people who knew people who knew people who knew people who knew people. And that's the way it's always been. It's all about meeting people, getting to know them, understanding what they do, understanding how you can help. I find it very good to find other people who have the job that I want, because if they are working and I'm qualified, they will then recommend me for the other jobs that they hear of. So that spreads out the job search process. Stay in touch with everybody. I meet people all the time. And it's shocking. I'll go and have coffee with them, and they've just graduated from film school and they're so interested in doing this. And I say the same thing every time: stay in touch. Don't stalk me, but write me a letter or an email every 3 months or so. Let me know what you're doing, what you want to do, what you have done. I may or may not reply, but stay in touch, because these jobs come up in a minute and they're gone in a minute. And what happens most of the time is I never hear from them again. And they either get frustrated with the business and leave. Very few have actually continued working that I've come across. There have been a very small handful of the hundreds that I've met over the years. And I can tell right away who's going to be serious. There's an example of a woman working on the show with us now that I met probably, I don't know, 4 years ago or so. And she sent me a nice cold call letter. I for time, and I responded to the letter, to the email. I said, call me in a few months. She did. I said, call me in a few months again. She did. And then I said, okay, let's meet for coffee. We met. She seemed very sharp and ambitious in all the right ways. And a few days after that, I got a call from another friend who was looking for an apprentice. And I said, I just met somebody who seems great. Don't know her, haven't worked with her. Here's her name. She worked with my friend. A couple years later, she would get in touch with me again over just, every 3 to 6 months, let me know what she's been doing, what she wants to do. I got an email from her again, hung up the phone. A bunch of stuff happened at work that created a bit of chaos. Picked up the phone again and said, are you working? Because we need somebody. And it was just fate. She had called me that morning, put herself back at the top of my list. And so she got a job, and she's been working for the last couple months because of that. A lot of it is timing. A lot of it is luck, but you have to be prepared and, and ready and willing. And that's sort of how it works in any level. With directing, people fall out of directing positions, and you have to be available and ready and be at the forefront of somebody's mind. And you have to have a certain amount of luck, and obviously talent and ability to back it up. And that's sort of how you keep working. And I've been working now pretty consistently for 40 years, and I really enjoy my job. And that's kind of how I got started. I got a job on this film working for free. Didn't know anything. And so I basically didn't deserve to be paid. And after about 6 months, they're like, okay, you know a lot now. And they started paying me, and I haven't stopped since. So that was my beginning.
Oh, thanks, Tonya. Do you want to talk a little bit about your first jobs and what they were, and
Sure.
how long your progression into being an apprentice?
My first job was an apprentice on a small film called River's Edge, where I learned to think dailies and code. Yeah, it was with I think it was, if not his first, it was maybe his second film. Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper was in it. Very interesting independent film. So I worked on that for a little over a year. Then I got another job on a TV show, and I just sort of kept building it and working on mostly features. It's much easier now. People jump around, but when I first started, pretty quickly you were put in either the feature category, the television category, the commercial category, at the time music videos. And you didn't really get to bounce around a lot. I mean, this was true with everybody in every position, pretty much, even actors and stuff. And now people go all over the place very quickly. And so now I still bounce back and forth a bit between features and mostly pilots. I do a lot of pilots for television shows. And I began working as an apprentice editor, then an assistant editor, then a first assistant editor. Then in between those jobs, I'd go off and try to edit something, usually something small and probably not very good, but occasionally something okay. That's where I met Katie. She came on, was interested in the same way. And I said, well, I have a job where I'm working for free, cutting this short. I can teach you and start. And that's how she started. And then continued working with me on other shows, and that's it. And there are people that I work with and then I don't see again for years, and then I end up working with them again, or paths always cross and go back and forth. And so it's mostly, obviously you have to understand your job and you have to be good at it, but you also have to understand people and how to get along with people and work with people.
Do you want to say a little bit about that with the relationships between directors and editors, and then maybe come along to talk about your long-time collaboration with Craig now?
Sure. Yeah, so I've worked with a lot of directors, and this started, I began to learn this a bit by working with different editors. There were some people early in my career that, in fact, I was very envious of, because they sort of found an editor and latched onto them. And I felt like, God, what a great thing to do, because you don't have to look for work anymore. You just ride their coattails. But what it actually happened was the people that did that, I noticed, began learning and doing only one specific thing, and over time becoming not very flexible to different situations and personalities and stuff. And where I bounced around between editors, because I needed to keep working. I didn't have a lot of money, and I needed to, I would take anything I could to keep working. And so I couldn't wait for an editor to get another job. I had to get one right away. But what it did is it taught me different workflows, different ways people like working, different personalities. And so I suddenly had this really great foundation of all of these different ways of dealing with situations. And so that helped me then when I became an editor, and obviously I began working for many different directors. Directors work very differently. Some don't want to be in the post-production process. They just want to send notes. Some sit right next to you all day long. Some love shooting, but not editing. Some love editing and don't really like shooting that much. Some people are really good at the politics of it, and some directors are terrible at the politics of it. And it's kind of shocking because, you're spending somebody else's money, and they have, it's a business for them, and they have expectations about what the film is going to be. And if it's not that, it turns into big problems. And so you have to become very flexible. I fortunately met a director about almost 20 years ago that I really enjoy working with. His name's Craig Gillespie. The first film we worked on was Lars and the Real Girl with Ryan Gosling. I don't know if anybody saw it. Did anybody see Lars and the Real Girl? You should. It's a great, great little movie. Peculiar, but very lovely. Comedy, very emotional. And then we proceeded to do some other films. I cut a couple of pilots with him, and all the time in between going and working with other directors on other films, and then coming back to him whenever possible. And I tried to stay available, but as I've not yet won the lottery, sometimes I just had to go get other jobs and come back, and you have to navigate that whole sort of financial part of it, which, is not the glamorous part, but it's the reality part for most people. And I always say there's three reasons to do a job. One is the project, which is, obviously the script. The second is the people involved in it. It's a great director. You've always liked working with them, or you a studio or producers, whatever it is. And the third is obviously the money. And as you go through your career, you will do different things for different reasons. There are certain times where you just have to do it for the money, and you work on the most atrocious thing that you don't even want your name on, but you get to pay your rent, and you get to put money in the bank, and you get to be available for the job you want to start holding out for. For me, I had to keep working a lot. So sometimes I wasn't available for those ones that I really wanted to do. So then you have to start managing your finances. You can't work if you're already on a job. So what you have to do is be able to survive those periods until you find the one that you want. And over time that becomes easier. But so at first you pick, I really want to do that project. Great. Or I really want to work with that person. Great. But great person, terrible script, lousy money. Great money, terrible people, terrible script, whatever that combination is. And as you move forward in your career, maybe you get two of those, great people, great money, terrible movie, or whatever that combination is. And as whatever you need at that point in your life, maybe once or twice in your career, you're lucky enough to have all three. I'm waiting. Any day now, that'll happen. But, if you get to the point where you get two, that's pretty good. And so anyway, I met Craig, and I spent much of my time trying to stay in sync with him as much as I could. And consequently, I've been able to work with him a lot over the last 20 years. I don't even know how many. We've probably done 7 or 8 movies together, 7 or 8 features, probably 5 or 6 pilots. We did a show a little while ago called Pam and Tommy. We did Your Friends and Neighbors, which is on right now. We did The United States of Terra. Again, I can't even think of what they all are, but we've done a lot of pilots for television shows. Ultimately, he got I, Tonya, which was a smaller film than he had done in the past. But again, great project, great people, terrible money. And I chose to do it. And And it was great for me. I ended up getting nominated for an Oscar. The film did really well. It's a film I'm extremely proud of. And then after that, he got Cruella for Disney, and which was also really wonderful. And I was lucky enough to work all the way through COVID because the schedule just kind of worked out that way. Ended up working from home, which was, as we all know, different. And and then just different things bouncing around. And right now I'm doing Supergirl with him. So it's a collab. It's a long collaboration. There are great pros and cons to it. Sometimes it's the devil, Sometimes it's, you can actually be honest and really talk to them. For the directors in the room, I encourage you to listen to people. They're just trying to help you make a better film. You don't have to do it. You make the film that you see in your eyes, but there's a big thing about sort of that happens with a lot of young directors that I see where they just think they know and they don't listen to the people around them, whether it's film people or audience. You're making films for an audience. Everybody's an audience, from the studio executive to the, person on the street, they're an audience. And it is very helpful to screen your films as much as possible and to listen to the feedback. And I'm not saying go for the lowest common denominator, but I'm saying just try to, be honest about what you have and what you need and what you want to do with it. So, and that's one of the things I really get to do with Craig. I can be very honest with him. Most of the time he listens, sometimes he doesn't. But the great thing is he'll say something, I'll make it better. I'll say something, he makes it better, and the film gets better and better through the process.
Is he one of the directors that sits in with you a lot, or does he give notes?
Yes. No, he sits in almost all the time through his director's cut. After that, it's he's usually busy going on and doing. He directs a lot of advertising and stuff, so he'll go off and start doing that. In that process around that time, because he knows that I'll carry on with the process, and I can call him and ask him what's needed. But he'll come in if we're previewing the film. He'll come in and go through the changes, obviously right away, right after the preview. But then, as things sort of slow down, he vanishes again. It's very helpful to sit in there. It's a big waste of an editor's time to constantly have to do something, show, and then not show early in the process why something's not working. A lot of times the director will ask you to do something and you're forced to spend a whole lot of time on something that is never going to work, but because they're not there, they can't see it, why it's not working. So it's very helpful to have a director close by.
Cool. Piers has got a quick question.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I think one of the things that I didn't understand, my dad's neighbor is the guy who edits Mission Impossible.
Oh yeah,
and
Eddie Hamilton.
And we also had somebody who I studied with who went on to be a director and has done quite big movies. But I didn't understand quite how integral the screening and previewing process is in terms of the final film, because I thought you edit with the director and then you kind of hand it over. But actually, it doesn't work like that at all. There's a whole phase of it where it's out of the director's hands. So just talk us through that a bit.
Yes, well, we're a bit in that stage right now where we're doing previews and stuff, and the studio gets very involved, and it obviously depends on how a film is doing, what the studio. A lot of times, and not necessarily this film at all, but I've worked on a lot of things where the director and the studio had very different ideas of what that was going to be. And they didn't find out until pretty late in the process, and that can be a little painful. But the preview process is really important. I mean, I remember Katie and I worked on Pulp Fiction together, and Quentin Tarantino loves screening the movie. But right now the preview process it's a very marketing driven thing where they ask a lot of questions. It all is about the numbers and the breakdowns, how many males between 15 and 23 and how many females between this age and that. It's very I don't want to use the word scientific, but a bit scientific in that, and that's what they push the film towards, their expectations. It's above my pay grade, their whole desire for that. But what's really interesting about the preview process and sitting in and watching people watch the movie is you feel the reaction. You can see when people are squirming when it's too long. You can see when people get up and go to the bathroom. You can see where they laugh, where they don't laugh. You can feel the energy in the room very clearly. And that was one of the things that Quentin Tarantino would always say is he doesn't want the cards. He doesn't want anybody to say excellent, very good, good. He wants to just sit in a theater and feel the audience. And I'd have to say I completely agree. You can absolutely tell what's going on. It's very interesting. Different audiences react slightly differently. You can make very small adjustments to a film and have overall tremendous improvement in it, by clarity, by certain performance things, by figuring out really what the story is. The people who do documentaries will know that better than anybody, because a lot of times those are created through the editorial process. Sometimes it becomes a completely different movie than what you anticipated in terms of what your subject matter of the film becomes, because things happen as you're filming it. And so it's an interesting process, but it's a big, I mean, we've had 4 previews on this film. I've worked on other films where we had 9. And I've worked on other films that scored really high. I mean, I worked on one film that had the highest score of any live action Disney movie ever, and it made no money at the box office. People loved it in the preview, and it made absolutely no money. So it was called $1 Million Arm with John Hamm. And it wasn't a great movie, but boy, people loved it in the theater. That, those screenings that we had several of them. It's an enjoyable film. Enjoyable films tend to score much better than darker, more serious films. And so if you're shooting for a number, there's certain films where you're never going to get that number, just, innately because of the project. But the preview process is really interesting. It's scary. It's painful sometimes. And sometimes it's super enlightening. All of a sudden, somebody will say something and you're like, oh my God, I've watched this 400 times and I never thought about that. And so it's really, really interesting. There's a lot of times when you talk to people where they say, oh, this part of the film was boring or slow. That's where they noticed it being slow. What actually happens a lot of the time is the previous 3 or 4 scenes began to slump. And so sometimes if you fix those scenes and pick up the pace in those and make sure that you don't have extra whatever that is slowing the audience down, if it's redundancy or just something that's not interesting, you'll never get that note again of that scene being slow, and you'd never touch that scene again. It's just everything prior to it. So you have to play with it and screen it and watch it. You're not making, I mean, you can, but nobody's going to give you very much money to make a movie for yourself. You're making it for the audience. And again,
is that turbocharged by Netflix and streamers? Are they even more data driven if you're doing pilots?
Yeah, probably they are. I don't really know that much about it because a lot of that preview process is not in front of my eyes, like it is with features. But I think that a lot of that also has happened so much in the script phase and whether or not they've decided to make the show. But I mean, I worked on a pilot for a very big show that was terrible. And I mean, it was terrible. And I worked with the showrunners for a long time, and they ended up going back and reshooting it with a new director. Big show called Game of Thrones. And the original pilot was really not good. Great director, but he didn't succeed at all. Part of that was the director's fault. Part of that was the script. I mean, it's a complicated story, and they needed to spend more time on that. And so they did, and they ended up rewriting a lot and moving a lot of stuff around and reshooting it again with a new director. And it became a hit. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting process. Editing is, all the jobs are really important, and you can't do anything without it. I mean, if you have a bad actor, it's painful to watch them. If you have a bad script, you don't get anywhere. There's nothing you can do with a bad script. Sorry, you can have the most talented people in the whole world, and it's never going to be good. And you can have the best script and the best performance, and yes, you can have maybe not as good sound, or maybe it's not lit that well or whatever, but you can still be drawn in emotionally. But a lot of that comes through the editorial process, figuring out who your characters are, and moving forward.
So Tanya, you've been previewing this film at the moment. Was that here in the UK or in America?
No, it was all in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay.
They always do them there. Sometimes they do them all over the place. We'll fly to other cities to do previews, but it's all based out of LA. Yeah.
No, because it struck me when you were saying that when I moved back from Los Angeles to here and went to see a film, I couldn't believe how quiet the audience was here. I was like laughing and like going, and still friends of mine don't like going to films with me because I like react quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're just quiet. With the States, people are clapping and jumping out their seats, and so like Quentin in the previews, you can feel that energy. I'm not sure you can feel it in the UK as much. People might love a film, but they're going to sit quite quietly.
Well, do UK produced films ever preview? Do you have that process here?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. UK produced, or is it always money ultimately from
Chris Smith, who was in my year on the MA here? He was telling me that they had previewed a film that was a horror film set in a tube. I think the poster's like of a bloody hand on the back of a tube train.
Yeah.
And they had previewed it here, and one of the feedback was there was a scene where the serial killer was torturing a woman who was blonde, and the lead was blonde, looked totally different person. But all the audience were like, why is the lead actress suddenly being tortured? Yeah. And so they spent, I think, 10 or 15 grand to reshoot just the scene with a red-headed woman, so that the audience would never make that mistake. So I know that he previews here for sure.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if it's the same. It would be interesting to see. I mean, it may have, there's all different. In the US, they have these huge companies that run all of these. I think there are 2 or 3 that run all of these previews, and it's a big thing. That's why I say screen the movie, whether it's a marketing preview process, or just, your friends and families that will be honest with you. Don't invite the people that will pat you on the back. That doesn't do any good. But if you invite your friends that can be brutal, I invite to early screenings of the films that I work on. I invite other editors. They're painfully, brutally honest, and it's really helpful. It's great. It's really, really great. The other thing that's great about inviting editors is they know what's possible. If you could, this is a very gross generalization, but sometimes writers have been in the room and they began writing other scenes, and I'm like, that doesn't do me any good. I don't have any other scenes. They're not shooting them. I mean, maybe if the film is going to go back and shoot other scenes, which does occasionally happen, but most of the time you're given your material and you have to make it work. So you have to get advice from people. I mean, listen to what people say and what they're missing. But if you can talk to other people who can really understand and reconstruct what you have, it's helpful. No, you don't have to go out and shoot other stuff.
Oh, can you talk a little bit about your process, Tonya? So you know, day one, they've shot, the rushes come in, or you've got a scene together. How do you approach a scene? What do you start with?
Well, sometimes it depends on the director. Some directors don't like looking at scenes assembled. There's a fair number of directors that are like that kind of want to wait until they get into the cutting room and can start in the beginning of the film and work their way forward. To me, that doesn't really, it's not as interesting to me, because I feel like my hands are a bit tied there if you don't start till that point. So even with those situations, the editors still put together the film, which allows you to familiarize yourself with the material. That's one of the biggest things. I watch all of the material that's shot, all of the dailies, as we call them, or rushes, as you call them. I watch everything, every single take, whether it's a preferred, directors used to say, this is my favorite, that's my favorite. I've never put together a scene using only those takes. There are always moments, glimmers, words, reactions, shots, whatever, from all of the takes, even the incomplete takes, and sometimes before they say action, and sometimes they say after they say cut. There are moments where you can find little bits and pieces. So I watch everything. So that's the first thing I do. When they shoot something, I get the material the next day. After my assistants have organized it, I watch every single frame. Sometimes I take notes, sometimes I put markers on. Sometimes I'll build a select reel, not very often. And then I begin putting those scenes together. I personally like to put them together and send them to the director as soon as possible. Craig likes working that way, which is one of the reasons I like working with him. I want him to see everything very quickly. It's by no means necessarily put together very well. It's fat. It's not necessarily all the right stuff, but it allows them to see what their coverage is, how it's actually coming together, what the performances are, if they want to start making adjustments to performances for other scenes, if it motivates them to add something. There's a lot that happens. It's really surprising how much this happens, where you get a scene and all of a sudden you're like, what was the purpose of that scene? Why was that, what is that? And you go back to the script and you realize it's not actually in dialogue, but it's in the screen direction in between the dialogue. And that bit of information somehow didn't get put on the film through whatever reason. It's shocking how much that happens. It's really, really important. I know some directors that do read-throughs without anybody reading that screen direction and confirming that the actual dialogue and what the actors are doing or potentially doing will tell the story. But if you put something there was one film I worked on where there was a little thing in the screen direction that let us know that it was a police car that these people were sitting in. At some point, somebody made a decision to make it an unmarked police car. And so now these people sitting in this car all of a sudden felt like the bad guys and not the good guys, because you didn't know that they were police. And I don't know when that decision was made. I don't know who did it. I don't know what maybe they decided, oh, just put them in this car. They're police, but all of a sudden you don't see that. You don't see, they're not pulling out their badges. There's no identifying thing to let you know that they're police. And all of a sudden I was like, how do we know they're police? And it was a big thing. The only way we knew that they were police was that it said it in that screen direction. And they never did anything like have one of them talk on the radio or anything that shut in the car that might have shut. It was just something that ended up being a bit of a problem in the movie. And so we ended up having to put the sound of a police radio in the car and play it a little bit longer. So right away we got, oh, okay, they're police. And that happens all the time. So anyway, I'll put the scene together, send it off to the director. I generally include no music, which is something I'll get into in a moment. But just so that they can quickly see, this is what it looks like. This is the sort of internal pacing of the scene. Pacing can always be tightened and everything, but the internal pacing of a scene, how quickly people are talking to each other, can never be tightened. So you have to figure out what that's supposed to be. You can always overlap dialogue and that kind of stuff, but still, what ends up happening is you oftentimes have to overcut a scene to get through it, as opposed to having the actors read their lines in a much more natural way. Then also sometimes lines become very clear. We don't want that. This bit of information is much more important earlier in the film or later in the film. And so they'll add that line back in somewhere else or whatever. So it just allows the director to start seeing things. Sometimes it's very painful for them because it's not what they imagined. They didn't want to start on that shot. They don't like that take that I chose or whatever. But for the most part, if they can take a step back and look at it, it's a lot of very good information for them that they get early in the process, as opposed to at the end when all of a sudden something an actor or an actress was doing was making you crazy and now you can't get rid of it. And so I show it to the director right away. They give me cursory notes about their thoughts, sometimes nothing, sometimes that's completely wrong. I had one time actually on Lars and the Real Girl, there was a scene with the brother. We were talking about this the other day. The director called me and said, I'm really worried about, he called on his way home from the set and I hadn't seen the material yet. And he said, I'm very worried about this scene. The actor played it very differently than he did in the audition. It happened to be the bit that he was auditioning. And I'm very concerned. I may have to reshoot it. Can you put it together as quickly as possible and send it to me? So the next day when I got the dailies, I watched it and I was like, this is a great scene. I don't know what his concern is. I put it together. I sent it to him. And he was panicked the whole day that he was going to have to reshoot the scene. But then because I got it to him quickly, it relieved him and he saw that it actually was a very good scene and he didn't have to. The reverse has happened. There have been scenes that I put together that I've called him up and I've said, this scene really isn't working for me, for whatever reason. And his initial reaction always is, it's fine. And about 24 hours later, he calls me and says, yeah, we're going to reshoot it. And so it's good. It's good to do that. So I said I didn't put it together with music because I am a very big believer, and other people don't work this way. There's no right way or wrong way, but I'm a very big believer in holding off on music as long as possible. Music is amazing. It can make even the worst stuff play really well. It can pace it up. It can move it along. It can make a suspenseful scene suspenseful. It can make a scary scene scary. It can make a dramatic scene dramatic. And because it does all of that so well, as an editor, I feel like I am obliged to make sure that I have explored everything I can do before I put that wonderful gravy on top, to make sure the scene is as tight, as good, as funny, as scary, as humorous, as whatever as it possibly can be, before I start putting music on. Because once you put music on, it works, and you tend to not examine it as hard as you should. And a lot of times it lengthens the editorial process because you can't quite figure out why it's not working, because the music's kind of making it work, but it's not great. If you can make a scene work, if you can make a suspense scene work without those high string violins causing the tension, it's going to be fantastic when you get music on. So and there's certain things that sometimes you put music on, you don't want to make a change in it because the music hits just perfectly like that. It's temp. You're going to change it anyway. It's going to change. They'll make it hit perfectly later. You can tighten it and make it efficient and as good as it possibly can be without music. So I tend to hold off on music as long as possible. There's some directors that absolutely don't want to look at anything without music because it's not as good. But that to me is like, this is part of the process. Also, it's like buying furniture for a house before you don't know what the house is. It's like, I don't know how this sofa or chair or table is going to fit in this house yet because I haven't built it yet. So let me build it. Then we'll get the exact right furniture in there to make it look beautiful and everything. And so if you start putting in music, I've worked on movies many times where they put in music that they think is going to be the music, and either score or songs, and we've flopped it and completely changed it, and it's slowed down the process a lot. So that's my bit of advice, is hold off on music until it's painful, until the scene can't be cut anymore. Obviously you have to have it in before you start screening it and showing it to people, but between yourself and the director, I would say hold off as long as possible.
That's a great advice, Tanya. Do you want to say a little bit about industry and AI? What's happening?
Well, the short answer is I have no idea. All I know is it's changing a lot. It's going to change a lot. It's going to, I mean, I can see even coming from the film background to now, there's so many things now that obviously the computer just does that we used to do by hand. That used to take hours and hours and hours and hours that we don't have to do. And now it's just push a button, boom, the change list is there. That's what now we don't even have to do that. The sound editors have programs that you just give them the reel, the computer goes, and there it is. They know what they have to change, and it will recut the sound. It'll do all kinds of stuff. I've used on films AI for temp ADR. There's certain lines that over the course of the process you realize you have to add a line for clarity from an actor, and they're very difficult to get in touch with. You don't want to constantly keep bothering them for lines. You're not sure what the line should be, and in the past obviously we just used whoever was in the cutting room to say the line, which stuck out quite a lot and was very annoying and bad acting. And it's funny, my assistant now, who's done a lot of the lines for the lead character, number one, coincidentally sounds like her, and number two, she's actually a pretty good actress. So it hasn't been so painful on this film, but on other films it's been really bad. And so there have been some films where we have used AI and the actor's voice for temp ADR. Studios now absolutely forbid it, but there was a brief period of time where they're like, great tool, let's do it. And it was very handy. There was one film that I worked on that they were really struggling with the story, and so we were changing the dialogue a lot. There was a lot of stuff happening on people's backs and this and that, and we needed to try stuff. So we type it in, it would spit it out, we put it in, and one time we ended up the actor came back to re-record the lines because they have to re-record all the lines. You can't leave anything in like that. The actor was like, why do I have to do that? That sounds great. I'm like, well, it's not you. And he's like, well, it sounds great to me. Use it. And I'm like, no, we can't. You've got to record it. And other actors we had to strip it all out because they would be incredibly offended, understandably offended, by being told to match what some computer had done, which is never what we want to do. It's just a tool for us to see how it's working. And so sometimes we'll take on this film we haven't used any AI voices at all. It would have been very handy to be able to, but the studio forbids it. So, but in the past, what we did is we recorded it so we could screen it for audiences. Then we would pull it out, have the assistant read it, and then the actor would see it's clearly somebody else, and they could come up with their own performance and interpretation of what that line should be, which is ideally the best situation. It's a tool. AI is a tool that I think is great. Like with all tools, if used properly, it's great. Social media, if used properly, it's a lot of fun. If used improperly, it's a disaster. And that's how I feel about it. It's going to change a lot. There will be far fewer people working on these movies because so much of it will be done by that. I saw a demonstration at Apple recently where they basically cut together a little theme and said, cut the sound and color time it, and poof, it's all done. Then you go back and make the little adjustments, but everything was just done in the push of a button. And so on one hand, it's great. You can do these sort of temp mixes for screenings incredibly quickly, but the creative process takes time. All of those things happen fast, but the human brain needs time to process and think. Writing didn't get any better with the advent of computers. It just got faster and you could make more changes. It didn't get any better. And it's the same.
Yeah, good point. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, Tonya, or shall I can open it up to questions?
No, you can open up to questions. That's great.
Anyone have questions? Can you hear?
Yeah, I think so.
Hi, sorry. When it comes to, obviously, because you've been working for I can't remember how long you mentioned, but like a few 2 decades now, and you've worked on kind of a variety of TV and film. Is there a change that you've seen in your style when you look at your earlier work compared to your later work?
Interesting,
Or
yeah.
would you say that your approach or your kind of style, or like what you bring in to the edit suite, has stayed the same?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I think the fundamental thing is storytelling. That stays the same. You have to be able to tell a good story. That'll never change. You don't want to watch a movie with a bad story. Nobody does. You get bored, you turn it off, you change the channel, you give it bad reviews, whatever. That's the whole point, is to tell some sort of an emotional story. That story can be told in many ways, and with dialogue, with images, with whatever it is, but whatever you're trying to convey, I don't think that has changed, nor will it ever change. I mean, it may not be as good as some things. I think, I think the biggest, for me, I know that pace has definitely changed. Films are a lot faster. They're cut a lot faster. That's a stylistic thing. People used to write in cursive, and now they print. That language has sort of changed because of it. Film language has gotten faster. Certain rules have changed, and I think that, so yes, a lot has changed like that. I think the speed and pace of things, you go back and you watch an older film and you're like, let's go, I got it. But other times there are other films where they're if the story and the emotion is there, it's like a good book. You don't want it to end. You don't want to come to that last page. So it's not a question of time. It's a question of content. I think that the biggest thing that's changed is that, and not in a good way, is that it's good in that there's YouTube and you can see all kinds of things, and there's a great variety of places that people can go to show their content or film or whatever you want to call it. The bigger places, the studios and the networks and the streamers are all of these big, massive corporations, and it feels to me like there's not a lot of people running around that love movies. They're trying to make money out of movies. And that tends to bring everything down to its lowest common denominator. Where I say screen it so that it's good for an audience, that's very different than bringing down and trying to get the biggest audience possible. The biggest audience possible, unless it's a fluke, is going to be, kind of by nature, the lowest common denominator. You don't want to offend anybody. You want to include everybody. You want to make it so it ends up getting a little bland. And I think studios are oftentimes, sadly too interested in that. The other big thing is that it's impossible to market a film now. You have no time. TV shows and films used to be put in theaters for several weeks or months, and an audience could grow, and you had plenty of time to go. And now I feel like, if I am busy that weekend, I've lost the film. It's gone already. There's no way to go see it. And it's all about the financial part of it. Also, there are films that come out I never hear of. There are TV shows on that have been on for seasons that I've never heard of it, because it's all marketing. And it's just hard. So that to find a way to get people to know about your film is very hard, unless you get this big, massive corporation behind you. And that causes all kinds of issues.
But have you looked back at any of your early work and been embarrassed?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the first thing, when you're first starting to edit, and the same will be true, with directing or anything like that, most likely, you don't start, there are phenomena, certainly, but you don't, it actually is it's very hard to do, and you don't get good at it for a while. But you have to practice, you have to try. I really tried also early in my career to work on all different sorts of genres. I didn't want to, you can get put in a place. You're the comedy editor, you're the action editor, you're the drama editor, you're the horror film editor. And I didn't want to be locked into making the same movie over and over again. So I very early tried to work on a bunch of different types of films so that I could always say I can do that. So that's another thing. And I would say the same is true with directing. If you want to do anything, or writing, you should try to do a number of different things so that you can keep your options open. Otherwise, you will end up with the first thing that you have success. That will be what you do forever.
Oh, there are other questions. I think. Yeah, go
Um, it's probably, I assume, quite easy to like distinguish when you're watching the work of like an amateur editor. But what would you say is like the biggest factor that separates like in a professional level, like a good editor from like a top level editor?
Yeah, trust in your audience. Trust in your audience, I would say. Trusting that they get the information, that you don't have to overstay your welcome with something or hit something too much on the head. Audiences, I think, are very savvy for the most part. I think a lot of times directors don't give them enough credit for understanding and moving on to the next thing.
Hi, just following what you were saying before about genre. What genre are you most like attracted to editing, or you find the most like fascinating?
I'm most I would say a couple. I mean, part of it is sort of the films that I like to go see, which tend to be dark comedies for me. Like I really liked I, Tonya. I liked Lars and the Real Girl. I liked even Cruella had a bit of a darkness to it. I like those. One of my favorite films is Harold and Maude. I like that. I think, but they're all character and story based. I'm here working on a superhero movie, which is enjoyable and fun, and I'm learning a lot and all of that. I don't really like them that much as a genre. I'm not really interested and I've learned far too much about, kryptonite on this movie that I ever wanted to know. So, and exactly what her laser eyes should look like. So yeah, so I enjoy working on those, but you'll never work on your favorite film because you just know what went into the sauce, and the process to get it there. It'll never end up happening, but it's a lot more enjoyable if you like it and you can have fun and you enjoy watching it 400 times. I'm not a big horror film fan. I don't, I've worked on a few and I don't think I'll ever work on another just because I just don't want to do it. But there's certainly a talent in people, and there are a lot of people who really love them, and great, have fun. I don't want to do it. So that's what I would say.
Hi, I'm thinking about it that like a scene doesn't land like you thought it would. Are there any like initial troubleshooting techniques that you try as an editor to make it translate better on screen?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to find out what the intention of it was in the script. Every scene has to have a reason for being there. It's still kind of amazing to me, still to this day, how many times you can lose entire scenes. They cost a lot of money to shoot and a lot of time to cut, and nobody is ever the wiser for it. It's really good to figure those things out before you spend all that time and money shooting. How many times we move things around, in a script that has been written and rewritten and looked at by so many people and all of that, and gets to this point of like, yes, we're spending $200 million on this. And then you're like, that scene can go there and that scene can go there. And why did we shoot that scene? Get rid of it. And, something that may have taken them, days to shoot. So the most important thing is that you have a solid script, and that the purpose of that scene. And then it's all about basically getting down to the bare bones of that scene. So if a scene isn't working and it really has a purpose, then you start trying to figure out what, is it really focused on that? Does the audience really understand why that scene is there? There's a thing, I think it's the guys of South Park did, the Therefore But. Have you heard of that? Have you seen that little clip of them? It's really interesting when they go through, I think that's what it is, Therefore and But. They go through the script and everything has to be attached by, this happens, therefore this happens, or this happens, but this happens. And that's, you have to really, you can guide, it's on YouTube, you can look it up. They'll describe it better than I am, but everything has to be there for a reason. And if a scene isn't working, that's why you figure out what is it that is it throwing your audience off, where then you have to use all of this struggle against gravity to pull them back into the story? Is it just too long? Is it more interesting to start halfway through the scene and just trying to hone the scene down to exactly what it needs to be to make it work? Or is it the performance? Is the actor or actress just not there? Are they being too soft or too harsh, or too not believing it in some way? And so analyze the performance, analyze why the scene's there, and make sure you are actually there for its purpose and only for its purpose.
Yeah.
Did you always work freelance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I've always worked freelance. I've never been employed by a studio or a company other than that particular project.
How did you know that you were kind of ready to kind of rely on your skill, particularly at those times where, work wasn't confirmed and you didn't have kind of other people to fall back on?
Yeah, I didn't. I've always lived way below my means. This sounds like your mother talking to you, but unless you have the means, live below your means, far below your means, because you have no idea when the next job is coming. And one of the things that I always say to unemployed people is, great, you're available when it comes along. It's very frustrating hearing about a job and not being available. I mean, there's certain times where you can leave shows and this and that. It's complicated and it's not terribly professional, but there are certain times where you can do that. I'm not saying never leave something, and do it in the best way you can, but I can't walk out on a huge movie just because I like this one better. It just doesn't work that way. So my advice is to live below your means and be able to take time and find the projects that you really want to do. And in between, like I said earlier, take the ones that you need to do to give yourself a little bit more security.
No.
I've got one.
Oh, yes. Sorry, please.
Yeah, I love the fact that you were talking about the fact that you're always going to have to work on stuff you don't necessarily want to work on, and you've got your
Yeah.
in my cinematography course, I teach John Alcott, who shot 2001, Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Barry Lyndon, and Beastmaster.
Yeah.
And Beastmaster is like one of the best, worst films of all time. It's like a really bad Conan ripoff. And it's like he's at the top of his game. He still does an absolutely terrible movie. So I think that's really refreshing. But I'd love you to just talk about the relationship between the rushes that are created by the cinematographer and the sound recorders. And my experience is that I've had very little contact with editors, and that's why I wasn't joking when I say I think editors in a way are more important than cinematographers, because you're fixing all the problems that we don't see. All that we see is, hey, the shot looks great, and then we fall in love with the shot, but it doesn't necessarily tell the story right. So, what's your experience of that? Because you've worked with some pretty phenomenal cinematographers.
Yeah. No, I have.
To what extent is that relationship collaborative?
Well, in response to your course and this and the DP, nobody ever intends to work on a bad movie. We all hope it's going to be at least decent. Sometimes it's never going to be great. You've read the script yourself, but nobody intends to work on a bad movie. And sometimes you think a film is going to be great and the stars were just not aligned. Everything just didn't work. The recipe, you can cook a chicken 1,000 times and every now and then it's just going to be overcooked. But in terms of that, the great thing about the editor is what I try to do is that I'm the first audience. Everybody else on the show, the production designer, the director of photography, the actors, the producer, everybody else is so involved ahead of time and going through all of those decisions that have to be made. You know, location scouting, casting, changing the script. We don't have enough days, so what scene do you want to lose? You know, all of these, it's a constant compromise to get to this point where you actually shoot it, and then it starts coming into my room. And then for me, I'm the audience. So I don't know, because I try not to go to the set. I really do. I mean, it can be fun and glamorous and this and that, but also it just doesn't do me any good, because I'm the audience. So I need to, when I watch it, I don't know who is in a good mood or a bad mood. I don't know if the actor in person is nice or a complete jerk. All I know is what I'm getting from that daily, and if I believe it or not. And if there is a shot that took our poor DP, 6 hours to set up and waiting for the light and this and that, and it doesn't work, guess what? I'm not including it or cutting it in half or whatever. I have no emotional attachment to it. My only attachment is to try to make the story the best it can be. And there are a lot of times, even when directors come in and they remember something funny happening on the set. This was so funny. And all of a sudden, magically, for some reason or another, when it actually shows up in the dailies, it's no longer funny, and vice versa. There's something that wasn't funny that's absolutely hysterical. And so you never know. And that happens so many times. Directors, producers, everybody are like, it was so funny on the set. Why wasn't it funny? Well, it's the vibe of the whole crew and everything at that moment, which you don't get to carry into the theater. It doesn't necessarily translate. So that's why when we're working on it, it's a brutally honest process. Does this performance work? Yes or no? Does this take work? Yes or no? Should it be a long shot or a close up? We need an insert or whatever it is to tell the story in whatever way, and not get too emotionally attached to the beautiful image that is beautiful and stunning and amazing. And oftentimes you do want those moments to stay and linger and give people a beat to think and let that emotion wash over them. And sometimes you're just like, move on. That's it. So we get to be the first audience, which allows us to be pretty brutal. I can work on a movie for a year and a half. Ultimately, what's going to happen is the lights come up, the audience walks out, they're walking back to their car, and they're like, yeah, that was a pretty good movie. What do you want to have for dinner? And that's it. That was it. They had fun, and that's the goal, and that's great. But there are other films that you work on that really stay with you, that you think about for the next few days, and you want to go back and watch again and again and again because it touches you in some way. And you hope to work on those. You hope you have a few of those. But most of the time, it's like, yeah, that was fun. You want to have Italian or Chinese? Let's go, and that's it.
Yeah. That's a bit early.
I think Italian is to me. Yeah. Could get Chinese Italian.
No, that didn't work. I once made Italian tacos and it didn't work.
No, sure.
But spaghetti bolognese and tacos. Any other questions or anything? Yeah.
Hi. What's the best quality an editor can have?
The best quality. Well, boy, that's a good one. The best, I don't know about the best. I think wanting to help the director make the film that they want to make, and that is best for the film. I think that would be it. Being able to communicate with somebody. A really bad quality for an editor to have is being possessive of something and insistent on something going their way. I'm not the director. I don't get to be the director. I don't get to make the final choice. I do all I can to a certain extent to try to talk them into things. But that can be pretty annoying too if you're constantly having somebody trying to push you in one direction that you don't feel is correct. So I think that the best quality is patience, and also not giving up. I guess that would be it. Not giving up on a scene. You have to cut and recut and recut and recut and recut, and there's always a better way of doing it. And that's why the saying, films don't get finished. You just pencils down at a certain point and let them go. But if you don't give up during that process and you push as hard as you can end up with a pretty wonderful movie that people really enjoy. I mean, I get emails. Lars and the Real Girl was 19 years ago. I worked on that, and people still discover the movie. I mean, like, I think only one person raised their hand, and it's a lovely, lovely film. And somebody will come across it, and click on it and watch it, and I get an email about how much they love it, and it's like their new favorite movie for a while, and that's really gratifying.
I remember advice that I think it was Alan Bell gave us.
Yeah.
And he said, as an editor, never comment on something's quality unless you can fix it. So never say to the director, oh, that performance isn't working, because there's fuck all you can do about it. Like, make sure your suggestion is, oh, I've got a way of fixing that. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I 100% agree with it, and that's what I'm saying. It's like you need to always try to make it. Films, you always. I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly how to answer your question about the best quality. It's a good question. I think it's just trying to constantly make it better. There is no right way, but you have to be determined, like a dog with a bone, to just keep trying to make it better and better. And that is true with the worst film. You have to make it the best that film can be, and I've worked on some wonderful films, and I've worked on some films that are not that great. And my goal is to make that film the best that film can possibly be. And so, yeah, like what Alan says, you can't, there's no point in complaining about things you can't fix. I mean, maybe you're lucky enough to work on a film that has money that can go out and reshoot, but the reality is, at that point, there's so many cooks in the kitchen, they'll never shoot what you think should be reshot. It's remarkable. I don't know why, but it never happens. Whenever we do reshoots on films, I'm always like, yeah, that's not what the movie needed. And it always. And so, yeah, you just have to, you're given what you're given, and that's it. And you just try to make it as good as it possibly can be.
Excellent. And Tonya, when's this film finished?
It comes out June 26th.
Oh, quite soon.
Mm-hmm. And we're nowhere near done.
So what? Are you finishing in May then, your job?
Yeah, the end of May. Yeah.
So is it mainly all effects going in now and stuff?
Yeah, we're still making some changes and stuff, but it's mostly visual effects. They take a long time to do. We're also mixing. Tomorrow we've done most of the score, but we're doing some pickups for some additional score that we wanted to change a bit. So we're doing some more of that, which is quite fun. And still just, color timing. There's still a lot that has to be done. Tomorrow we're still bringing in about 5 or 6 actors to loop some lines and get these lines, audible, or change them a little bit for story or whatever the reason is. So there's still a lot to do.
Okay. Oh, you can't see me. I'm here. Okay, cool. Any other questions for Tonya before we say goodbye? No. Okay. Let's do a big thank you for Tonya.
Very good. Thanks, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for
good luck. Good luck, and enjoy what you do. It can be very, very fun. Very fun. Enjoy.